Welcome to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers, for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
Episode 13, a deeper look into socialization. Do you want to move on to some good practices?
Let's do it.
All right. So, some good practices as I see it, and I'm kind of framing these as fixes in direct response to these bad practices, okay? So, a way to avoid being short-sighted and, kind of taking a step forward and drawing that hard line with, no, my dog must do this at all costs without realizing what you're giving up for that is to seek out, a trainer who's really good with socialization, who can help you understand the complete context of what exactly that is. Desensitization, socialization, interaction, proper mannerisms, and just helping you understand, like we've said earlier in the podcast, that of course I want my dog to be, and I tell people this a lot, I want my dog to be, to have positive association, or at the very least neutral association with what exactly is happening. If we're walking down the street, you don't have to love everybody, just walk. I just don't want you afraid of anybody. But again, it all depends on context. I want my dogs to be able to play if that's what the time calls for. I want them to be able to tune out and relax if that's what the time calls for. And having that kind of fluid idea, and it's ever changing, just like training itself, and just like the dog in and of themselves as they grow and evolve. I think that that's one thing that will make us much better in terms of understanding how to properly socialize our dogs. Another thing is looking at the big picture. It kind of ties into that last point, but it's a little different in that, understand when we talk about trust and really what the goal of socialization is, to develop positive associations and develop trust and, and just good vibes all around, so that the dog is able to function under whatever distraction they're dealing with, be it people in the city, tractors in the country. It's a matter of horses. Yeah. Some dogs are afraid of horses, water, so if you want your dog, like you just, for whatever reason, think your dog just really should swim, you really want him to swim, don't just toss him in the pool one day, because not only are you going to scare him out of the water, you're going to make him second guess you in other contexts.
Right.
So that was an overall loss for you, a big one, I would say, and so be willing to give a little. If the dog's not a swimming dog, all right, fine, no big deal. If your dog's not a daycare dog, all right, fine, no big deal. We'll find workarounds for these things, but you do have to kind of meet your dog in the middle. There are certain things I expect out of them in terms of, like we've talked about in society. I need certain manners, certain behavior, certain, social cues. I can't have you lunging and things like that, but I'm going to help you out. And if you don't want to be pet by people, I won't let people pet you. If you don't want to be around other dogs, I won't let their dogs near you. And it's our job kind of to be a bit of a parent in that regard.
It's important for people to really know animal behavior and animal development, right? Which is not common knowledge, because it's not out there super digestible, and it's not a societal common sense, right? So, running a daycare for 10 years, it's very common. We see dogs at certain ages start what we call graduating from daycare, right? Which in essence means the social venue that dog has no longer fits that dog, right? So I've seen dogs that as soon as they're fully vaccinated, they come into daycare and they have friends and they play and they have a good time. But what happens is, with the way that they're raised at home, with their personalities and characteristics that, are genetic and part of their personality that gets developed, eventually there becomes a time where I would say 70 to 80% of dogs who start in daycare around 4 months, they phase out of daycare by the age of 3. Right. And so that sounds weird. And a lot of my clients, they look at this as like the dog is all of a sudden becoming unsocial. But in reality, all that's happening is the dog is growing up. Right. And so some of the things that we would run into all the time is the dog who is a common daycare goer, who would come 5-6 days a week, all of a sudden started getting in fights or picking on younger puppies or whatever, or started taking control of the yard, whatever it was. And this is bound to happen, right? Because dogs get older. And just like humans, there was an age where I really liked to party, and I liked to go to clubs, and I liked to have fun, and I liked to dance. And that was my version of a good time. And then nowadays, in my 30s, I like to be home and watch a movie, or I like to drink some wine, or I like to, do stuff like that. So what I find fun or how I want to spend my energy shifts as the dog gets a little bit older as well. And I think people need to give their dogs room to allow that to happen. So as dogs start to become less about dogs, and just like humans, they become more family oriented. They want to spend more time at the house. They want to spend more time with the humans, spend more time with the kids. They rather sleep more throughout the day versus have to go to daycare every day. So that's something really, really important. Just know that your dogs, if you've done a good job by socializing your dog from the time that they were young, and if you've developed control over your dog, meaning you can get them to calm down, you can get them to come back, you maintain their focus around other animals, right? That's really all the basics you really need. Mm-hmm. Then we should be able to, then we should have been able to shape and mold our dog's social career up to those points. And if your dog can't go to daycare anymore, it doesn't mean your dog's a bad dog. It just means the daycare's not his scene anymore.
Right.
So maybe that's where dog parks come into play, or maybe that's where play dates come into play, right? It doesn't mean your dog's social career has to go away.
Yeah, pack walks or something.
Yeah, it might just have to transform into something else.
Right.
Something that interests him or her.
You might even say it's a moving target.
What? Did you say that? Did you say the movie target thing again? It's true. But as long as you keep trying to hit it and you stay dynamic with the dog, socialization is honestly something that you continue to do for the whole dog's life. But again, it depends on what your lifestyle requires, right? There will be a time the dog that goes to the dog park every single day won't need to go every single day. He'll be happy with twice a week, right? But that dog, and you have to make those calls. But I think sometimes dogs are held too much to the standard of being perfect. They can't show attitude. They can't show aggression. They can't be reactive. In essence, we want our dogs to be saints and be perfect all the time, when even us as humans who are civilized, well-mannered, we can't guarantee that we're not going to get angry or in a fight sometime today. Right. We can't guarantee that. So it's a little unfair sometimes with the dogs.
Yeah. Well, context matters. Again, context matters. Sometimes, I don't want to give off the wrong message, but sometimes, let's say like in self-defense, it can be appropriate. It all just depends on what exactly the full picture looks like. And it's just hard because humans largely get to kind of dictate that for themselves. I mean, to an extent, like we have laws and things, but those were written by other humans who, whereas dogs are kind of, their context is largely dictated by people, even from a legal standpoint. Even if your dog is like legally, or rather, if your dog is like ethically, let's say, in the right, legally they're not. And there's lots of stuff there to chew on, and it's definitely a dense topic. But I would say overall, look at things in as close to you can in the light of like a parent. Is my dog technically right? Yeah, maybe he is. Maybe he is right to be annoyed with this other dog. Maybe he is right to be nervous of this person or whatever the case. But as a parent, isn't it kind of my job to be like, look, I hear what you're saying and everything. I'm not upset with you, but this is not healthy. I'm just telling you. So let's do something else instead. And
set your dogs up for success.
Exactly. Right. For real long-term success, and sometimes that means kind of playing peacekeeper. Sometimes that means playing keep away and just don't.
It means pick your dog's friends.
Right.
Pick your dog's friends. Oh, we have to add this to bad practices. I'm sorry, man. Let's rewind. Adding this to bad practices. Bad practices is people letting their dogs meet on leash, on walk, in passing.
Oh, yeah.
That's bad practice, people. Like, it might seem cute and might turn out great a couple times, but there's always going to be that time that other dog lunges or growls at your dog. Bottom line, every professional agrees dogs socialize better off of a leash.
God, and you know what too? Like, yeah, with that being said, a huge bad practice that I just saw the other day, and I see all the time, like especially like Runyon Canyon, stuff like that when I was in LA, was if your dog is social, great. If your dog is like perfectly capable of walking up to a leashed dog because they're off leash and be friendly, great. That doesn't mean that other dog is friendly. Don't let your off leash dog go and harass other people's dogs. You don't know what you're getting into.
Yeah. It doesn't matter if your dog's friendly. If you could provoke the other dog to be bad.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's kind of the big thing is we have to look at it. Like, we let our dogs do things that we would never let our human children do, ever. And we do it because we go, well, they're dogs. You're right. They are dogs and they do have dog instincts. However, They live in a human world,
Mm-hmm.
and they will constantly be judged by human standards, no matter what you think. So if you don't have control over your dog, get control over your dog. If your dog lacks socialization, figure out a safe protocol and ways to get that dog more socialized. If your dog is scared of things, figure out a proper protocol to desensitize those dogs. But most importantly, if you guys have a puppy, make sure you socialize the hell out of that dog. And what we mean by do it in a balanced way,
Mm-hmm.
right? Don't over socialize. Don't under socialize. Your dog having dogs at home does not count as socialization. Socialization has to do with how you interact with strangers that are not your family, right? I have so many clients that go, oh, I have 3 dogs at home. My dog's well socialized. Having siblings and making friends are 2 different things,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I would just tell people, that these are some of the basic things to really just consider when socializing. But most importantly, if you have a puppy, anything before the age of 18 weeks, it's super important for you to socialize your dog with humans and other animals or other dogs before 18 weeks. If you guys can do that, you guys save your puppy a huge risk of bad lack of socialization behavior, right? Aggression, reactivity. Get your dog socialized before the age of 18 weeks, which sometimes is contradicted by what our vets tell us to do, right? Your vet will tell you, with good reason because they have their own points, but realistically, depending on where you live, your vet will tell you don't let your dog out of the house before he's fully vaccinated. The average dog is not fully vaccinated until about 4 to 4.5 months. So that means for those 18 weeks, your dog was kept inside and not exposed to anything. And by the time your dog is exposed to stuff outside, your dog's going to be scared out of his mind. So we have to have workarounds, right? There's been such a huge feud between veterinarian advice and dog behavior advice. Your dog has to be exposed to humans and other animals before the age of 18 weeks, or else the window closes. Usually after 18 weeks, there's something called a fear stage. And that fear stage is where your dog starts discriminating friend or foe. Who's my family? Who's a friend? Who should I be scared of? Who should I not? That fear stage usually lasts about 2 to 3 weeks. But the way that we manage our dogs before that fear stage and during that fear stage really lays down a lot of groundwork for the rest of the dog's childhood. So really important. Just want to give you guys a little bit of the science behind it all.
Yeah, it's got a certain trajectory to it,
Yeah.
right? And like a level of expectation that you can try to gauge given what the dog's socialization looked like during that critical time period in the dog's development. Absolutely.